Hello and Assalamu alaikum. I am Kashif Kamran and I welcome you to the day 2 of the Advanced Audit and Assurance Practice to Pass webinar for December 2019 exams being organized by ACCA Pakistan. Now the agenda of the day 2 is the same like the agenda we had for day 1 yesterday, and that is to focus on the question number 1 of the AAA exam paper and the untouched areas. Now, yesterday, in the very first day, I started to focus on the first question, and we have done the December 15 question, the June 17 question, and the June 15 question. We were in the middle of the June 16 question when the session ends, so I'll be resuming from the June 16 question, and we'll take the journey ahead, and we'll be doing the other questions as well in the session today. So today's session will include the June 16, the June 19, and then it will include the September 18, the June 18, the December 17, and the December 18. So all these questions will be drilled today in terms of the untouched area. Now, I have emphasized upon that yesterday, what basically the untouched area means in the day 1, because the core areas have been consistently covered in my previous webinars, which includes risk, which is a fundamental part of the question number 1, ethical and professional issues, which is another fundamental part of the question number 1, and the procedures. So I have gone through them many times in my previous webinars. So let's start on with the agenda, and let's start on where we were yesterday in terms of the June 16 question number 1, and we were looking at the untouched areas from that exam paper. Now, right in front of your screen is the June 16 question number 1, which we were doing yesterday. And in this June 16 question number 1, we were looking at the untouched area. That was basically the part A. The part A for 5 marks was asking, explain why analytical procedures are performed as fundamental part of our risk assessment procedure at the planning stage of the audit. And I did mention yesterday that the knowledge questions which comes in the first question of the AAA paper, the marking scheme is 2 marks per valid point you will be writing. So explain why analytical procedures are performed as fundamental part of our risk assessment procedure. We started to drill that yesterday when the session ended. So let's start drilling the same from the start of the day 2. I just need to bring this question down from my day 1 file. We started with this question, and the marking scheme of this question was defined yesterday, and the time management was even discussed yesterday. I hope you remember the time rules we made yesterday. That is, we have 1.95 minutes per mark, and from that 1.95 minutes, 1/4 of the time is to be spent on reading and planning. So this is the June 16 question in front of you. 5 marks and 2 marks per point. So we need to write a 3-point answer. Explain why analytical procedures are fundamental part of risk assessment procedure. So examiner is asking a very journal knowledge from a student of audit that why APs are fundamental part of risk assessment procedures. So let's start to construct the answer. Now we need to focus on the why analytical procedures are part of risk assessment procedures. Number 1, we can have 3 points for a 5 marks answer, and then you can elaborate upon them. The first, why they are a fundamental part of risk assessment procedures. Number 1, because they help to identify the risk of material misstatements. We know the analytical procedures are very helpful, are very beneficial at the planning stage of audit, because at the planning stage of the audit, the auditor performs the ratio analysis. The auditor performs comparison of the current year with the last year. The auditor do the trend analysis, and this all helps the auditor to identify unusual fluctuations, and those unusual fluctuations then helps the auditor to identify the risk of material misstatement. So they're the very important part of the risk assessment procedure, the analytical procedures. Number two, why analytical procedures are fundamental part of risk assessment procedures? Because it helps the auditor gain or develop sufficient knowledge of the business. Through the analytical procedure, the auditor develops or gains sufficient knowledge of the business, and that sufficient knowledge of the business from the analytical procedure or from the analysis of the financial statement which the auditor has gathered enables the auditor to be more skeptical in the audit. So the knowledge you get from analytical procedure, from the insights of the financial statement, from the fluctuations, from the ratio analysis, really provides a good opportunity to the auditor to gain knowledge and to be more skeptical. And another why analytical procedures are part of risk assessment procedures, because they do help the auditor in formulating helps the auditor in formulating the audit strategy and audit plan. It really helps you in the planning process. It really helps you in developing your audit strategy, because I hope you've read the article which was emphasized yesterday, planning and audit of financial statement. And within that planning and audit of financial statement, the examiner has defined what an audit strategy and what an audit plan is. So we had 2 points, uh, 2 marks per point, and we need to write 3 points to score 6 marks, 5 marks. But this is just a sketch answer. You need to make them into a para form. For example, if I just convert one of them to para form, and you know exactly how much length of an answer you're writing, the very first point, I develop it in my answer. The analytical procedures, and I wrote in the bracket AP, so I can use that short form in my exam paper then. The analytical procedures are beneficial to the auditor at the planning stage of the audit, as these procedures helps auditor identify risk of material misstatements through unusual fluctuations identified through ratio analysis, comparison of current year with last year, etc. See how I developed my 1 point? So I used analytical procedure in a full form, and then I abbreviated the analytical procedure as AP. So later I can use AP as a short form because I abbreviated that into the very first sentences, right? So see how I developed 1 point? Okay, let's do another one. And then the third one you will be developing yourself. Let's draft the third one. The analytical procedures further help auditor in developing an audit strategy and an audit plan, because the analytical procedures help auditor in defining the risky areas, which enables auditor to define the time and resources, resources and procedures needed to mitigate the risky areas. Now we know the audit strategy and the audit plan helps the auditor in terms of defining the time, in terms of defining the resources, and in terms of defining the procedure. So when you know the risky areas through the analytical procedure, those risky areas will help you in developing an audit strategy and an audit plan, and that will eventually help you in defining the time, in defining the resource, and in defining the procedures you needed to mitigate the risky area. So I've drafted two of the three, and you need to draft the third one yourself. But see the length of drafting. You are writing the knowledge marks in exam paper, right? And you need to know the marking scheme. Every y is giving you 2 marks, but you cannot just drag your answer, because ultimately these are knowledge marks and you cannot just waste time. See, we developed that yesterday in the session, that we have 7.31 minutes to write the answer. So within the 7.31 minutes, we need to frame the answer, which looks very good for the examiner, right? So that is now done with the June 16 paper. So the June 16 paper was asking us, explain why analytical procedures are performed as a fundamental part of risk assessment procedures. And I've given you the answer for that. They're performed as fundamental part of risk assessment procedures because they help us to identify the risky areas, they help us to gain knowledge of the business, and they really help us to devise an audit strategy and an audit plan. So that is a 5 marks answer constructed from the June 16 question number 1. Now, as a student, you should know the importance of analytical procedure, the benefits of analytical procedure, and you should know that what benefit the auditor gets when he performs analytical procedure at the planning stage of the audit. So you cannot just be unprepared on these crucial areas which do fall within the question number 1. We were discussing yesterday that the question number 1 is set at the planning stage. So anything which happens at the planning stage is really important part of the question number 1. Okay, let's move on from the June 16 question number 1 and go down into the next question. Okay, so we have done the June 16 question now. So we are now moving towards the June 19 question, the question number 1 of the June 19 exam. Let's see what was examined in the very first question in the June 19 exam, being the very recent paper, and what was the untouched area in the question number 1 of the June 19 exams. Okay, now right in front of your screen is the June 19 exam, the most recent one uploaded. And let's see what was unusual in the very first question in terms of the untouched area. You go down and you come to the next page where the requirements are given for the question. Okay, the first requirement is about risk of material misstatement. So that's the core area we are not emphasizing on because that have been covered so many times in the previous webinar, 20 marks. Then the audit procedures, another core area been covered so many times in the previous webinar, is taking 10 marks. So 10 marks on procedures, 20 marks on risk of material misstatement. Then the examiner comes to 6 marks, which is the knowledge marks, which we need to focus on. See this, we need to focus on the C part. It says, discuss the methods to be considered in planning to use an auditor expert in the audit of the fruit which are recognized as biological assets of the company. So the company has some biological assets, and the auditor is planning to use the expert in that process. So the examiner is asking, discuss the matters to be considered in planning to use an auditor's expert in the audit of the fruit, which are recognized as biological assets in the company. We have 6 marks. So that means we need to discuss the matters in considering to use the work of an expert, right, for 6 marks. So let's take it down towards the Word file. And on the Word file, Let's start with the analysis of this question. June 19, question number 1, part C. And this June 19, question number 1, part C is asking us to discuss the matters in planning to use the work of an auditor's expert. So I hope everyone knows the answer for this. Whenever the auditor relies on the work of an expert, whether it is an auditor's expert or whether it is a management expert, there are typical matters, right, which you need to focus on. So discuss the matters in planning to use the work of an auditor's expert. And the marks given for this question is 6. So we have 6 marks. So that means we need to write 2 marks per point, and we need to write 3 points to score the 6 marks. Now we know the time management. 6 marks multiplied by 1.95 minutes is equal to how much? Quick answers. 6 marks multiplied by 1.95. If I can get quick answers from the panel, okay, 11.7 minutes. Now from the 11.7 minutes, we have 1/4 time as planning. So how much is the planning time? Okay, 2.9 minutes is the planning time. So how much is the writing time then? We have, what is the writing time to write this answer? The writing time is almost 8.7 minutes. So this is exactly what you need to do. You need to plan your time. And I've given you a rule yesterday, right? That you need to multiply the marks with 1.95, and you need to find the total time you have for the whole answer. From that total time, the 1/4 time should be spent on planning, and the remaining time, the 3/4 time, should be spent on writing. Now let's see how to write in the answer. We know the matters, right? The matters you consider when you're planning the work of an expert. And those matters are given in the ISA 620, which tells you using the work of an expert. Now, how would I frame the answer? You're focusing on the matters to use the work of an expert. Now, the very first matter when you're using the work of an expert is that you're very much concerned about the expert's independence. The expert should be independent, right? Then only I can use his work. If he's not independent, I cannot rely on his work. Secondly, I will be very much concerned about the expert's competence or the expert's experience, how experienced the expert is in the biological assets. Have you ever worked on biological assets before? So competence and experience. And then I will be looking at the work documentation and the work documented by an expert. Is it an adequate amount of work the expert has performed, and can I rely on his work? So see, I have a 6 marks answer, but that needs to be formulated into paragraph. So independence is the first matter, right? When you are planning to use the work of an expert. Now, what will you write under this? The auditor should evaluate the independence of the auditor's expert before placing reliance on the work. The auditor should carefully consider that the expert has no relationship has no relationship or a self-interest with the company or the management. So you need to consider that the expert you want to rely on has no familiarity threat with the company or the management, or has no self-interest threat with the company or management, and he is independent. Because if he is independent, then you can rely on his work. Second, competence. The expert to be relied upon, the expert to be relied upon should be competent in uh, performing work on biological assets. So you link that to the case study. So the expert to be relied upon should be competent in performing work on biological assets and have sufficient experience of working as an expert in this relevant area. So he has been working in this relevant area for a very long time. So I can trust him, I can rely on him. Yes, there is no need to give reference to the ISA 610, right? Because examiner says there is no marks for naming the ISA. The last one, work documentation. The auditor should also consider the adequacy of the work performed and documented by the expert to conclude whether reliance on the work can be placed or not. The auditor would be carefully evaluating the assumptions and the realisticness of assumptions used by the expert before placing reliance on the work. So I've developed the whole answer, right? So we need to write a 3-point answer. I've given you 3 points. Before I rely on the expert, I must be considering the independence of the expert, number 1. I should be considering the competence of the expert, number 2. And I should be considering the work documentation, number 3. So if on the basis of the 3, everything comes in the favor of the auditor, then the auditor can use the work of an expert, right? And I didn't give the reference to ISA 610 because examiner says there is no mark of naming the standard or giving the reference number of the standard, and that has been made clarified many times even in my previous webinar. So that's one easy requirement which came in the June 19 exams, question number 1C for 6 marks. Right? Now let's look at the other requirement from the same exam paper. Now, when you look at the next part of the June 19 exams, it says, in Exhibit 5, I have provided you with an email I received from Len Larch, one of the company's production managers. So the partner has received an email from Len Larch, one of the company's production manager. In respect of this, in your briefing note, you should also. Let's see what is an email you got from Len Larch, and what is so particular about this email you got from Len Larch? Because the partner is saying, I got an email from Len Larch, one of the company's production manager, and that is given in the Exhibit 5. So we should be attacking the Exhibit 5 only, and we'll be looking at the email which you got from Len Larch. Let's see what is so very special about the email you got from Len Larch and what we need to do about that. We have 10 marks on that email, and what exactly we need to do for 10 marks. Discuss the audit implication of the email from Len Larch recommending any further actions to be taken by your firm. So the examiner wants us to discuss the implication of the email from Len Larch recommending any further actions to be taken by your firm. So that's an interesting question. 10 marks. Okay, let's take that to the next page. Start to draft in the answer. June 19. Still the question number 1, part D. This is now worth 10 marks, and we need to discuss the implications. Discuss the implication from the email received from discuss the implication of the email from Len. Discuss the implication of the email from Len and further actions to be taken. And we have 10 marks to this requirement. Divided by 2 per point is equal to, we need to write the 5-point answer. So a 5-point answer giving us 10 marks here. And again, you go with the time management. When you look at the time management of this, you need to multiply 10 marks with 1.95. What is the answer? 10 multiplied by 1.95. How much time should we be spending? Okay, we should be spending 19.5 minutes. And how much time should I be spending on planning? 1/4 should be the planning time. So that's 4.9 minutes. So how much time should I be having for writing this answer? 14.6 minutes. So will you be doing the same exercise in exam hall, that you multiply the total marks for every requirement with 1.95, and then from that you know that 1/4 of the time I can spend on the reading and planning. Now this email from Len, of which we need to discuss the implication. We need to discuss the implication of the email from Len, and we need to write the further action. And the examiner is saying the email is in the exhibit 5. So this email we got is in the exhibit 5. So how much time we have to read the exhibit 5? Almost 5 minutes, right? In 5 minutes, we should read exhibit 5, plan exhibit 5, and then in 14 minutes, we should be writing the answer. And how many points are we writing in the answer? 5 points. Do you understand the importance of this in exam hall? Do you understand the importance of allocating time to each requirement within the barriers assigned? So if you spend overtime on one requirement, you're spoiling your paper and you're spoiling your success. So do everyone realize the importance of time management for every requirement and how much time you have for reading and planning? So let's go down reading the exhibit 5 and see what is exactly in the exhibit 5. Let's do the planning. And for the planning, we need to read the exhibit 5 to see what is the email from Len is. And after the planning, we'll do the answer. Okay, let's go down and let's read the email which we got in the exhibit 5. Okay, here is the exhibit 5. Let's see what is the email we got from Len and what can be the implication of this email. Exhibit 5, email sent from Len, an employee of Margaret Company, to Ben, the audit partner. So the employee of a company, Len, has sent an email to the partner, and the partner is very skeptical about this email, and he wants you to discuss the implication of this email. So let's see what Len has written to Ben. The email starts with, "Hello, Ben. I obtained your contact details from your firm websites, and I hope you don't mind me approaching you directly." So he's trying to whistleblow something, right? That means Len has some inside information, and Len want to share that inside information with the audit engagement partner, Ben. "I am emailing to voice some concern over the recent business practices at Margaret." So he's very much concerned about, he wants to raise some concerns over the recent business practices of Margaret. Let's see what are those business practices and what can be the implication of those on the audit. In my role as the production manager in one of the company's factory, I inspect sample of fruits which comes into the factory from the company's farm and speak to the farmers on a regular basis. Recently, several farmers told me that they have been instructed to use chemicals to spray the fruit trees, which should increase the fruit yield. However, some of these chemicals are prohibited for use in this country because they can be toxic to the human. Now, that's the big problem. So, some of these chemicals which are to be sprayed on the fruit trees, some of these chemicals are prohibited for use in the country because they can be toxic to the human beings. And the company is using them as a spray on the trees, on the fruit trees. And you are the manager, you are the production manager, and you got this information. And this is a very important information for the auditor. We'll see why and how. While talking to one of my friends who is a production manager from another factory, it transpired that he had also been suspicious that banned chemicals are being used in farms. So you're using some banned chemicals. You have been suspicious that banned chemicals are being used in the farms. So another problem. He raised the issue with one of the company's director who allegedly gave him $10,000 and asked him not to discuss with anyone. So the directors have bribed him. The directors have given him $10,000 to keep quiet, not to share this with anyone. So $10,000 of a bribe given because they were using some banned chemicals and some of the chemicals were prohibited. My friend said that I should ask for the same sum of money, but I felt uncomfortable. So Len felt uncomfortable. He don't want to have the $10,000 and thought I should tell someone from outside the company. And that is where he approached Ben. Please do not mention my name if you decide to investigate this matter further. So now we have a situation ready in 5 minutes. Some of the chemicals being sprayed are prohibited and are toxic to human. And there is been a use of banned chemicals in the farm, and the directors have given $10,000 to one of the production manager from the factory. Okay, let's now construct the answer. What key findings have we got? The key findings we got, number one, is uh, there is a use of chemical to spray on the fruit trees, which is prohibited in the country, which is prohibited in the country. Not just prohibited in the country, it is also toxic to humans. And that's the reason it's been prohibited. The second, they're using some banned chemicals at farm. And thirdly, the production manager was bribed. The production manager was bribed by directors for $10,000 to keep quiet. So we have a 10 marks answer on hold. Like just one last emphasis. Look at the last paragraph. It says, while talking to one of my friend who's a production manager from another factory of market, right? Not another factory of another company. So he was speaking to a production manager from another factory which belongs to market. And that production manager was bribed by the directors of market. So we're talking about the same entity, right? We're not talking about different entities here. Okay, let's see what's happening here. We need to plan the answer now. And we have a 10 marks answer divided by 2 marks per valid point. And we need to write a 5-point answer. And that is to be written in 14.6 minutes. Discuss the implication of the email you got from Len. I think the first implication is if I make my sketch answer and then convert the sketch answer to paragraphs. The first implication of the email you got from Len is the non-compliance with laws and regulations, because the company was using some banned chemicals. So the first implication is that there was a non-compliance uh, with laws and regulations. And if there is a non-compliance with laws and regulation, what is the auditor responsibility in this context? As being the auditor of this company, when you identify that there is a non-compliance with laws and regulation, what is your responsibility as an auditor? So that will also fall under the implication that what should you be doing as an auditor? So auditor responsibility in this context. Then next, it will also bring a question mark on the client integrity, because the client is doing something very unethical, something very bad. They're using the banned chemicals, they're using the spray, which is prohibited. So there is a question mark on the client integrity. And then I need to take some actions in terms of I need to do some discussions with those charged with governance. I need to discuss the issue with TCWG of this company. I might be taking legal advice if necessary for the non-compliance with laws and regulations, or I might be even taking an action of communicating uh, this matter to a regulator if the management fail to respond. If the management failed to respond to this non-compliance and the management failed to take an action on this point, I will be communicating this matter to the regulator, but that has to be my last action. See how I wrote my action? First, I'm discussing it with the people within the company. And if the people within the company are reluctant and they don't want to um, take an action, then I'll go for a legal advice, and then I'll be communicating this matter to a regulator. Now, I hope all of you know that there has been an article which was published by the examining team, which is basically having a title, Auditor Responsibility for Non-Compliance with Laws and Regulations. And this article was abbreviated as NOCLR, Non-Compliance with Laws and Regulation. And that is where this question has been formulated. And this is not a new article, right? This article, I think, was published a year ago. And if you read that article, this article really tells you what is the auditor responsibility when you come to know that there is a non-compliance in a company of whom you are the auditor. So you need to realize this article. You need to realize this article from the ACCA website here. If I can just show you this article on a screen here. See this article in front of your screen here, responding to non-compliance with laws and regulation. You can see this article, the very first one on your screen now, responding to non-compliance with laws and regulation. And when you go into this article, responding to non-compliance with laws and regulation, the focal point of this article is, see, the focal point of the article is responsibilities of an auditor. Now, if you see an exam question where there is a non-compliance, as an auditor, what is your responsibility? So examiner is more interested to know what is your responsibility as an auditor of this company when you got to know from Len that there has been a non-compliance. So the email of Len is been very important, because the email of Len has informed you that there is a non-compliance, right? And because of the non-compliance, what are the responsibilities of an auditor? So will you be clicking this article on the website of ACCA, downloading this article, reading this article, so that you know what are fundamental responsibilities of an auditor when there is a non-compliance? And can you see the short form being used by the examiner, no clear, non-compliance with laws and regulation in the very first line? So will everyone be downloading this article if I can get your quick answers? And will everyone be reading this article to know exactly what are auditor responsibility when there is a no clear in a company? Because on a very regular basis, examiner do test non-compliance with laws and regulation, right? And this article has been there on the ACCA website, I think, since last over a year now. And you are encouraged to visit the ACCA website. You are encouraged to download these articles, and you are encouraged to read this article. So that is from where I will get the answer for the June 19 paper, right? So the June 19 paper is asking me, there is a non-compliance with laws and regulation, and I got to know that from the email of Len. Now, what is my responsibility in context to the non-compliance? Obviously, there is a question mark on the client integrity, and I would be concerned about the future. So I'm not writing the full scale answer here, but at least I can give you some pointers, and on the basis of the pointer, you will draft your answer, right? So the very first point, non-compliance with laws and regulations. Now, when there is a non-compliance with laws and regulation, the very first thing you need to assure and you need to write is that the responsibility for compliance with laws is fundamentally rest with laws fundamentally rest with management. So the very first thing you should be assured that the responsibility for compliance with laws and regulations fundamentally rests with the management of this company. But this management is not playing the positive role, and this management is using the prohibited chemicals in the spray of the fruit trees, and they're using banned chemicals at the farm. So I think the management here is not fulfilling the responsibility which is put on the shoulders of the management. So the responsibility for the compliance with laws fundamentally rests with management. However, the management seems not to be, the management seems not to follow this responsibility. There is an ISA 250, right? And the ISA 250 is about auditors' responsibility about laws and regulation, and the examiner has covered that in the article. So firstly, you will tell examiner that the responsibility for laws rests with management, but the management seems not to follow this responsibility. So I, being an auditor, needs to do something. So what is the auditor responsibility in this context? Now, if the auditor becomes aware, of any non-compliance, if the auditor becomes aware of any non-compliance, the auditor has to take some steps to be taken by auditor. Now, there are so many steps given in the article. I'm not writing all those steps. You need to explore the article for step. But if the auditor become aware of the non-compliance, and you have become aware from the email of Len, then what steps you should be taking as an auditor? You should be thinking about the impact of the non-compliance. The first thing you will be thinking is how this actually happened. Is the management deliberately involved in this act? And it seems so because they bribed the person. So how this actually happened? Are there weak controls in the company which is resulting into the non-compliance of laws and regulation, or is the management deliberately involved in the act? It seems that the management is bribing the person just to keep quiet. Secondly, is there any impact of non-compliance on the financial statement, like a provision, impact of non-compliance on the financial statements? Example, a penalty, example, a fine, and for which we need to recognize a provision. So auditor will be concerned about uh, how this happened. Is the management deliberately involved? Because if the management is deliberately involved, it will bring a question mark on the client integrity. Is there any impact on the financial statement, like a penalty or a fine and a provision to be recognized? So auditor needs to fulfill his set of responsibility. Then obviously there is a question mark on client integrity. And when there is a question mark on a client integrity, that increases the risk in the audit. Auditor needs to be more skeptical in the audit. Because if you think the management is involved in a wrongdoing, you need to become skeptical. You need to be more skeptical. You need to increase the risk in the audit. Because when you think the management is not demonstrating integrity, then all of a sudden the risk in the audit increases and you need to become more skeptical and you need to think about your future client relationships. Will you be continuing with this company in future? These are all question marks, right? Which should be developed. Yes, it is true that the management is overriding controls. Management is giving bribes, and when the management is giving bribes, that means the management is overriding the controls. So you need to discuss the issue with those charged with governance to solve the matter. And if they are reluctant, if they are reluctant, then you need to think about taking a legal advice. Then you communicate this matter to a regulator, right? We're not defining legal advice in the exam, right? We just say seek a legal advice, take a legal advice if necessary. So please plan a 10 marks answer. I have just given you a clue. I've just given you a sketched. You can explore the examiner answer of the June 19 paper. You can download the June 19 answer. You can see how the examiner wrote the answer for June 19 question number 1 part D. But before you do so, first download the article on responding to non-compliance with laws and regulation. Read the article, have a mindset, and when you have the mindset of the auditor responsibility when there is a non-compliance, I think you can write a better answer yourself. And I've given you a suggested answer that how you can approach your answer, making up a 10 marks answer. Is everyone clear on this answer plan? And will eventually the reading of the article help you? Once you are done with the article, I think solving the answer becomes more easier for you because you will know the tone of the article and you know exactly from the article that what is the responsibility of the auditor when he finds a no-clear in this context. So is everyone clear in this context? So will all of you be encouraged to read the article and identify the relevant points from the article? And your approach should be that you extract the points from the article and then try to solve the June 19 paper. But are you realizing that in the June 19 exams, which is the most recent uploaded paper, 10 marks were allocated to non-compliance with laws and regulation and 6 marks were allocated to using the work of an expert. 16 marks were allocated in the question number 1 on knowledge. Now you see, you go to exam hall and you start attempting the question number 1. So is question number 1 only about risk and procedures? Is question 1 just about risk, procedures, and ethical issues? No, it's beyond that. So see, in the June 19 exams, we almost had 16 marks here. We almost had 16 marks in the requirement C and requirement D out of the total 46 marks, because then 4 marks is for the briefing note. So we had 10 marks here and we had 6 marks above. Right? So please ensure that you read this article, which I just shown you in front of your screen from the ACCA website, which has the title Responding to Non-Compliance with Laws and Regulation. That's in front of your screen now. You need to download this article, read this article. And once you read this article, you will imagine how easy the answer is for the June 19 exam paper. So has this June 19 exam paper been an eye opener for you that uh, that it's not just risk, it's not just procedures, it's not just ethics, it's even beyond that. So if you're not prepared on the full syllabus, and a lot of time students do so selective study for AAA. They are not going into reading all the articles. Honestly, I've seen so many students, they're unaware of articles. They have not read 100% articles available on the ACCA website. You cannot take a risk. You have no idea. Examiner can test any article for knowledge. And there is a series of articles which are available on ACCA website. You can download them and at least make a habit of reading one on a daily basis. So will you be making a habit of reading one article a day and taking notes of one article a day? It will really help you, right, in your exam paper, right? So you should make a habit of reading the articles, and only the articles which you can find most recent one on the website. See, this is a website demonstrating the articles. So you need to scroll down these articles, and whatever articles are here, at least try to read these articles. And they're not many articles, right? I think they're approximately something like 17 to 18 articles. And at least if you can read the top 10 or the top 12 or the top 14, sounds better, right? So we're off this question as well now. So that's completing the March, June 19 question as well. So all questions from the day one are now wrapped up. We need to start looking at the questions for day two now to see what have come in September 18 question, what have come in the June 18 question, what have come in the December 17 question, and what have come in the December 18 question. And by the end of the session today, you will have so much knowledge of miscellaneous areas, untouched areas, which have come in the question number one. But I hope you realize such areas are real important for your success. Have you got benefit of such areas? Because over my previous webinars, I've been focusing on the core areas like risk, procedures, and ethics. But this time I thought it's better to explore such areas which can also contribute to your success, because you can cover the core areas from my previous webinar. Okay, let's take on another question from September 18. Let's see what's an unusual thing in the September 18 question which the examiner is asking us. September 18 question number one. Okay, now the day two practice questions. And in the day two practice question, we need to see first the September 18 question number one. Okay, right in front of your screen is the September 18 question number one. Let's see what was the unusual area in this September 18 question number one. So we have a fair idea, are we prepared for it or not? Okay, you go down this question and you read this email. Okay, the first 24 marks is allocated to audit risk. So audit risk is having 24 marks. Again, that's a core area. Then in the second part, B, we need to make procedures, and the procedures are worth 6 marks. So 30 marks allocated to the core areas. Then comes the C part, using the information provided in the exhibit 5. So a very specific exhibit 5, just like the June 19 paper where we were looking at the exhibit 5 even. In this case even, we are looking at the information in the exhibit 5, using the information in exhibit 5. Evaluate the extract of the audit strategy prepared by Vulture Associate. in respect of their audit of Link's company and discuss any implication for the group audit. And the marks are 10. We need to read the Exhibit 5 and we need to evaluate the strategy which has been prepared by Vulture Associate in respect of the audit of Links and discuss any implication for the group audit. Now we are the group auditor, right, in this question. Links is a subsidiary of the group, and we are not the auditor of Links, but someone else is the auditor of Links, and the name of the auditor for Links is Vulture Associate, right? So Vulture is doing the audit of Links. We know that this is known as a component auditor. So Vulture is basically the component auditor, and Vulture is looking after Links. Links is a subsidiary of the group, and I am or you are the auditor of the group. And we need to evaluate the strategy prepared by Vulture in respect of the audit of Links company. So let's start to evaluate the strategy prepared by Vulture in respect of Links and see is there any implication for the group audit for 10 marks. Okay, so that's the question number 1C, and that's we need to evaluate the audit strategy, right? We are not, the question does not say that matters to consider on relying the work of an component auditor. The question is saying that the component auditor has prepared a strategy and you need to evaluate the strategy. There might be something wrong in the strategy, or there might be something right in the strategy. You need to evaluate the strategy prepared by Vulture in respect of Links, and are there any implication for the group audit, 10 marks. So let's start with this question now. Okay, September 18, question number 1, part C, and this question is worth 10 marks. We need to use Exhibit 5 specifically, and we need to evaluate the audit strategy. We need to evaluate the audit strategy evaluate the audit strategy prepared by Vulture for Links and discuss any implications for the group audit. If there are any implications, we need to discuss that for group audit. And the marks are 10. So we know the equation, right? 10 marks divided by 2 marks per valid point, and is equal to, we are writing a 5-point answer. So 5-point answer will give us the 10 marks. So again, we need to work on the time management. We have 10 marks multiplied by 1.95 minutes per mark is equal to 19.5 minutes. And from the 19.5 minutes, the 1/4 time should be spent on planning, which is again 4.9 minutes. So we're left with a writing time of 14. We have a writing time left of 14.6 minutes approximately. Right, so again and again I'm doing this from the session yesterday so that you start to realize the importance of time management, and I hope this is giving you some benefits. If I can get your answers to this quickly, is this time management will help you eventually when you're practicing at home? Will you keep yourself down to this time management when you're practicing back at home? Because that will eventually help you in the exam paper, right? And are you understanding how important is it to plan the answer before we write the answer? I first plan, right? I don't start to write the answer, even though I know the answer, but I'm still planning the answer to show you how important planning the answer is. Okay, let's start first to plan the answer. Plan the answer, and we have approximately 5 minutes for that. So let's read the Exhibit 5. Let's see what's in the Exhibit 5. And I have mentioned you that Vulture is the auditor of Links. Links is a subsidiary, and we are auditing the group. and Vulture is a component auditor, right? And we are the group auditor. So let's see what audit strategy has been prepared by Vulture for links, and is there any problem in this strategy? Because the examiner is saying you need to evaluate the audit strategy. So when the examiner says you need to evaluate something, then that means there must be some issues within the audit strategy prepared by Vulture. Let's see what are issues in the audit strategy prepared by Vulture in the exhibit number 5. Okay, let's go down, read the audit strategy prepared by Vulture. Okay, here is the exhibit 5 in front of your screen. And this is the exhibit 5, which pertains to the audit strategy, which has been prepared by Vulture. Vulture is a component auditor, and he is performing audit of Links. Links is a subsidiary of the group. Let's see, has he prepared the right strategy or the wrong strategy? The 2 points below are an extract from the audit strategy. We can see the 2 points, right? One is control effectiveness and one is the internal audit. Other section of the audit strategy, including the audit risk assessment, have been reviewed by the group audit team and are considered to be satisfactory. So apart from these two areas, control effectiveness and internal audit, the other parts of the audit strategy has already been reviewed by the group auditor, and the group auditor is very much satisfied with the other parts of the strategy. Links company is projected to be a loss making this year, and the group audit team is confident that sufficient procedures on going concern have been planned for. So even the group team is very much satisfied with the audit strategy Vulture have for the going concern of Links company. So we are not uh, working on the areas where the group audit team has already been satisfied, but there are two areas where the group audit team is not satisfied. One of them is control effectiveness, and one of them is internal audit. In the rest of the areas, the group audit team has already been satisfied. Is that clear with all of you now? So is the group audit team satisfied with the rest of the audit strategy prepared by Vulture? If I can get your quick answers. Is the group auditor satisfied with the strategy prepared by Vulture, mm, apart from the two areas which has been given to us? So uh, yes, so let's see the areas which have been given to us, and let's see what have been the issues with control effectiveness and internal audit. I'm reading control effectiveness. We will place reliance on internal control, which will reduce the amount of substantive testings. Okay, that's fine, which needs to be performed. So they want to place reliance on controls to reduce the substantive testing. This is justified on the grounds that in the previous year audit, controls were tested and found to be highly effective. So they think we can place reliance on controls and we can reduce the substantive testing because in the last year audit, we found controls to be very effective. We do not plan to retest controls. Look at this line very carefully. We do not plan to retest controls as according to the management, there have been no changes in the system during the year. Can we just trust management? Whatever the management is saying and we just rely on it? We do not plan to retest the controls as according to management there have been no changes. Should we check? Should we check ourselves? Has there been any changes or has there been no changes? Or should we just rely on the management? So I think this is the wrong statement here, right? Even though they want to place reliance on the control and they want to reduce the substantive procedures, but they look at the line in the red. It says, we do not plan to retest controls. They should had, before they conclude whether there have been any changes or not. If there had been no changes, then they could reduce their substantive testings. But what if you test yourself and you found changes? We cannot just rely alone on management, right? So let's find this first statement here. Control, the first one regarding the control effectiveness. And in the control effectiveness, the very first statement we're getting is that they believe that they don't want to retest the controls, as according to management there has been no changes in controls from the last year. So that's one important statement, right? That is a wrong statement coming from Vulture, and this is something where we need to gain marks now when we write in the answer. So we cannot just rely on management, right? Till the time we do this ourselves and we retest the controls ourselves, and if there is no change, then we can reduce the substantive testing. But we need to do it ourselves, right? We cannot just rely on the management in this case. So that's one problem. Okay, let's go down reading the other problem. The other problem relates with internal auditor. Let's see what's the problem relating with internal auditor. Link's company, I'm reading the paragraph of internal audit, right? Link's company has offered the service of the internal audit team to help perform audit procedure. Can we rely on the services of the internal audit team as auditors without verifying the internal auditor's independence, competence, experience? Look at the first line. The first line says Link's company has been offered the service of its internal audit team to help perform audit procedure. We are planning to use the internal auditor to complete the work. But nowhere it is written that before we plan to use the internal auditor, should we plan to use the internal auditor after considering whether the internal auditor is independent, whether the internal auditor is competent, or we can just rely on the internal auditor irrespective. So we are planning to use, but should something be done before we are planning to use? We are planning to use the internal auditor. So should we do something before planning? So that's another problem. We are planning to use the work of internal auditor, but there is something missing here, right? That uh, we need to check the competence, we need to check the independence, we need to check the experience of the internal auditor, experience, and we need to check the work performed, work documented, just like the expert we did today, right? So we are planning to use the work of an internal auditor, but we cannot plan to use the work of the internal auditor unless and until we have checked the competence, independence, experience, and the work documentation. And I hope over here, Vulture is trying to rely on the internal auditor without checking the competence, independence, experience, and the work documented. Number two, okay, we are planning to use the internal auditors to complete the audit work in respect of trade receivables as they have performed work on this area during the year. So they want to use the internal auditor in terms of the audit work in respect of trade receivables because they think the internal auditor have already done the work in trade receivable. It will be efficient for them to perform and conclude on the relevant audit procedures. Uh, can we um, delegate our audit procedures to the internal auditor? Look at this line. It says it will be efficient for them to perform and conclude on the relevant audit procedures. I need to do my audit procedures myself, right? I cannot just put my burden on the internal auditor. But it says it will be efficient for them to perform and conclude on the relevant audit procedure. Then what is my role? Then what is my role as an external auditor? As an external auditor, I can rely on them. Rely on them means I can reduce my work. But reduce my work does not mean that I put everything on the internal auditor. It seems over here as if I'm trying to put everything on the internal auditor. It will be efficient for them to perform and conclude on the relevant audit procedure, including the trade receivable circularization. Who sends the confirmation letter? Can we trust the internal auditor to send the confirmation letters to the trade receivables? Is it not the fundamental responsibility of the external auditor to send the confirmation letters to the third parties? Do you all believe that's a big problem here? See, so much we are trusting the internal auditor so much that we are even telling the internal auditor that you can even circularize the confirmations on our behalf. Whereas we know that the ISA 505, which deals with confirmation, has very clearly written in the ISA 505 that it is the auditor responsibility to circularize the confirmation directly. And the evaluation of the allowance of trade receivable. Should not the auditor study the allowance for trade receivable? It is such a subjective area. Can I give a subjective area or a risky area to the internal auditor? Allowance is such a subjective area, right? Allowance is such a risky area. Can I give a risky area to the internal auditor? So there are a lot of problems here, right? Firstly, I have not tested the internal auditor for his independence, competence, experience. And without that, I am giving him the entire workload of receivables. So can I give important areas of my work to internal auditor? The answer is no. But have I given important work to this internal auditor on receivables? Number one, I have given him the circulation of letters to receivables. This is such an important area. And then the allowance for bad debts. These are two very important areas which have been given to the internal auditor, that the internal auditor can do the circulation of the letters and the internal auditor can work on the allowance for bad debt. Then what's left in receivable? Imagine these are two important areas of receivables, because the circulation of the receivable letters confirms the existence of the receivable and the allowance confirms the valuation of the receivables. So if I just pass on the circulation and allowance to the internal auditor, am I doing justice with receivable as an external auditor? Am I doing justice with receivable substantive procedures as being an external auditor if I put all this to the internal auditor? Do you all believe these are two very important procedures, working on allowance and working on circulation? Do you all believe these are important procedures? If I can get your quick answers. And do you believe important procedures can be given to the external auditor, to the internal auditor, sorry? And I have not even checked. I have not even checked the competence and independence of the internal auditor. Am I doing the blind reliance here? Do you all believe I am doing a blind reliance on the internal auditor? So, see, have we got the problems for 10 marks? Yes. So when you start to write in the answer, you need to critically evaluate the strategy which the vulture has prepared for links. And there are definite problems, right, in the strategy prepared by vulture. Let's make a planned answer. How would you be writing the answer? I'll not be giving you a complete answer, but at least I'll give you a start. How would you be starting to write the answer for 10 marks? Okay, let's see the answer. The audit strategy prepared by vulture for links has number of issues which are evaluated as follow. So you're telling examiner, the audit strategy prepared by vulture for links has a number of issues which are evaluated as follow. Number one, was the control effectiveness. And within control effectiveness, we had many problems. The very first problem under control effectiveness, the vulture should perform walk through test for controls this year to confirm directly whether there has been any changes or no changes in the controls from the last year. Vulture cannot just rely on management statement. Vulture cannot just rely on management statement that there had been no changes in controls. So do you all agree with this? We just discussed that when I was planning my case, that as Vulture, we should have performed a walkthrough test for controls this year to confirm whether there has been any changes from the last year or not. We cannot just rely on the management, right? That whatever the management is saying is right. So that's one problem, that Vulture should have performed walkthrough tests rather than just placing a blind reliance on the management statement. Number two, the substantive testings can be reduced if controls are effective, but the auditor need to test controls, key controls, at least each year to confirm they are effective before implementing this audit strategy. The auditor cannot rely on the last year conclusion. Your last year conclusion was controls are effective. And based upon the last year conclusion that the controls are effective, you are saying that the substantive procedures should reduce down. Should you not test controls each year? At least the key controls, not every control. At least the key control should be tested every year so that you have an idea whether they're operating effectively or not. Or can we just rely on the conclusion of the last year? So every audit is unique, right? Every audit is unique. Can we just rely on the conclusions of the last year for the next year audit? Is that logical? If I can get your answers to this, can I just rely on the conclusions of the last year for this year audit? And do you all believe every audit is unique? So every year I need to restart things. Every year I need to test the controls to see whether they are operating effectively or not, right? So my audit strategy, which says that the substantive procedures should reduce because controls are effective, but those controls were effective in the last year, right? I need to see whether controls are effective this year before I say that the substantive procedures should reduce down. So I think currently there are some problems in the strategy prepared by Vulture. And do you all agree with these two problems I wrote in front? That we cannot just rely on the management statements, we should have tested them ourselves. And the second problem is that we cannot just rely on the last year conclusions, right? We should test controls at least every year, which are known as the key controls, right? So there are problems, right, in control effectiveness of this strategy. Okay, the last point I'm writing, and then you continue with the answer. Internal audit. The component auditor, which is Vulture, the component auditor can only rely on the work of internal auditor after a careful consideration is given to the internal auditor independence, competence, experience, and work documented. If the internal auditor if the internal auditor demonstrate independence, then the reliance can be placed on internal audit work. It seems that Vulture had Vulture is trying Vulture is trying to place reliance without checking the internal without checking the internal auditor. So can I just rely on the internal auditor without checking the internal auditor for his competence and experience and for his independence? It is like that Vulture is trying to rely on the internal auditor without even checking the internal auditor. So I think the Vulture is placing a wrong reliance. It could be that the internal auditor is not independent. How can I rely on him? It could be that the internal auditor is not competent, or it could be that the internal auditor is not experienced, and I'm relying on him. Right? So you can continue this answer, right? You can write something about receivables, the wrong strategy, the wrong audit strategy on receivable, that you're giving the work of circulation and allowance to the internal auditor, which should have been the key areas, which should have been focused on by the component auditor. You can see the examiner answer as well for this exam paper, September 18, question number 1, part C. But do you realize that such questions is just your intelligence in exam hall? Using the exhibit 5, there was something given in the exhibit 5, and when you read the exhibit 5, you got to know that there are some obvious problems in the audit strategy which has been prepared by Vulture, and you were evaluating those obvious problems. So is everyone sound and clear on the way you should be constructing this 10 marks answer? So is everyone clear on the obvious weaknesses and obvious issues you had in the audit strategy document which was prepared by Vulture? So was Exhibit 5 very productive? Right, so I've already drafted like a 6 marks answer out of 10. So you can continue drafting the remaining 4 marks answer yourself. So you can have a practice as well of the same question, and you know exactly the way to write in the answer. Yes, and if you are clear on the independence and competence, right, then obviously you can rely on the work of the internal auditor. But if you are not, then obviously you cannot. Okay, now just before we move further, where we need to place reliance on the same question, just prior to the break, I'm moving on to the same question, September 18. I think there is another part here. Okay, the other part is on ethics, right? So we need to discuss the ethical issues, which is a core area already done in the previous webinar for 6 marks. So in this question, there was a 10 marks requirement, which was focusing on the audit strategy prepared by Vulture, and that was given in the case study, and we need to go through the audit strategy. I even recommended you yesterday on my day 1, and I have shown you this technical article yesterday on the day 1, which was planning the audit, which was this planning and audit of financial statement, right? I did show you this article yesterday, and I even annotated this article for you yesterday, that you need to read this article for when does audit planning take place, or what are preliminary activities which takes place at the stage of planning, and then what is an audit strategy and an audit plan. So you can take more knowledge about what exactly is an audit strategy, but over in that question, the section of the audit strategy was given and we were just to evaluate what was wrong in the audit strategy. But I hope that I even encouraged this article to be read yesterday, and all of you must have gone through this article and have developed your effective points and notes in terms of this. Right, so please ensure that you see the examiner answers of these questions as well, wherever you get stuck or wherever you don't get any understanding when you are reading a case. So after you see my answers and my sessions, you can then refer back to the examiner answers to get more guidance in this case out. Right, so we're now left with three more questions. June 18, question number 1, December 17, question number 1, and December 18, question number 1. And a lot of surprises in these three questions, more surprises, as we have been seeing consistently since yesterday, that there are so many surprise areas in across the question number 1. And I hope you've got those surprises right and must have opened your mindset that you can still prepare on these areas. So have this been a surprise package for all of you, that the untouched areas, which comes in the first question? Right, so we are taking the first break now, and post break, I'll be resuming with June 18, the very first one. A lot of surprise factors in June 18 question. Then we will be going to the December 17 and winding up things with the December 18 question, so that you have an effective mindset of the question 1 when the session ends today. Now, just before I go off break, I will be looking forward to your feedback so far on the session 1 of the day 2. So if you can drop in your feedbacks about how the session has been so far in terms of your understanding of the question number 1, and in terms of how you should be reading, planning, writing your answers to the first question. Right, I'll keep dropping your feedbacks about the session so far. In the meantime, let's uh, plan a break now, and post break, resume back with three more questions to effectively prepare you for the question number 1. So it's a break time, and we will resume at 7:55 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time, and from 7:55 till 9:10, because we started today at 6:10, so till 9:10 we will be working on the remaining three questions, right? So I'm going off to a break, and I'll see you back in approximately 15 minutes from now to start on with the three remaining questions. Right, I'll be looking forward to your feedbacks and how things are going so far from yesterday to today in terms of your understanding of the first question. Keep dropping the feedback during the break, and any questions you have, also keep dropping that so I can identify the questions and respond to them over the WhatsApp group. Welcome back after the break. Prior to the break, we were looking at the September 18 question number one. So let's start on with the journey from June 18, December 17, and December 18, so we can complete the question number one practice of the untouched areas. Okay, let's start on with June 18. Let's see what's inside the June 18 exam paper and what can we learn out of the June 18 question number one. Now, if you just take a look at the June 18 question number one from the practice questions for the day two. Okay, now right in front of your screen is the June 18 question number one. Let's see what's inside this question where we need to have a focus on. Now this question has the first requirement, which is about audit risk. And again, 14 marks have been allocated to this requirement being the core requirement. Then in the second part, the examiner is asking a question for 9 marks, which is utmost important for knowledge. Identify and explain the matters which the audit team should approach with a high degree of professional skepticism. Identify and explain the matters which the audit team should approach with a high degree of professional skepticism. Which matters will the audit team be approaching with a high degree of professional skepticism? Now we know auditor needs to be skeptical, but the examiner is asking identify and explain the matters which the audit team should approach with a high degree of professional skepticism. The marks are 9. And for 9 marks, if you divide them by 2, you need to write 5 matters which the audit team should approach with a high degree of professional skepticism. Let's find the answer for this. June 2018, question number 1, A and A2. And this question is asking us identify and explain the matters which the audit team should approach with a high degree of professional skepticism. And the examiner is giving us 9 marks for this. Now we know the marks allocation, how to do it. We have 9 marks, so that means 9 marks divided by 2 per point is equal to writing 5 valid matters. 5 valid matters which can give us the 9 marks answer here. And again, in terms of the time management for this 9 marks answer, we have 9 marks multiplied by 1.95 minutes. So how much time in total we have for this answer? 9 marks multiplied by 1.95. If I can have the answer for this, 9 marks multiplied by 1.95, okay, 17.5 minutes. And from the 17.5 minutes, we have 1/4 time for planning. So the 1/4 time we have for planning is equal to 4.3 minutes. So how much time are we left for writing? The writing time is 13.1 minutes. Okay, now let's do the planning time, and we have 4.3 minutes of the planning time. 4.3 minutes of planning time. Now we need to understand professional skepticism first, and we need to understand internally that what matters should the auditor approach with more degree of professional skepticism or with a higher degree of professional skepticism. And I hope everyone has a clear knowledge about what professional skepticism is. And you will be amazed, and I have no idea how many of you have gone through that. I have also shared that as an article for the day two resources, which is the article known as the day two technical articles. And when you look at the day two technical articles, that is professional skepticism. There is an article, not a new article. This is an article which is there for last so many months. An examiner tests you on professional skepticism. Examiner wants to know that as a student, you do read what the examining team publish. And I still believe there will be so many students who are attending this live webinar who have not yet seen this article, who have not even yet read this article. And when you explore this article is not just telling you the meaning of the word professional skepticism. This article is telling you even the areas where you should be focusing on, where you should be more skeptical. See, this article is telling you basically what is professional skepticism, so you can explore that. This article is telling you professional skepticism includes being alert, and then the examiner is giving you some examples of areas where you should be alert. You can go through the list. Then how the auditor applies professional skepticism. You need to go through this, and you will be amazed to know that how does an auditor apply professional skepticism, or when does the auditor apply professional skepticism, at what stages of audit the auditor applies professional skepticism, right? And then some specific applications of professional skepticism, areas where professional skepticism can be applied. The examiner is saying you need to be professionally skeptical in the area of fraud. You need to be professionally skeptical in the area of accounting estimates. You need to be professionally skeptical in the area of going concern. You need to be professionally skeptical in the area of related party transactions. See, these are all examples given by examiner. You need to be skeptical for any non-compliance with laws and regulations, consideration of laws and regulations. See, the examiner has even given examples that you need to be skeptical for consideration of laws and regulation. You need to be skeptical for related parties. You need to be skeptical for going concern. You need to be skeptical for accounting estimates. Can you see those examples in front of your screen? And you need to be skeptical for fraud. So how many of you have not even read this article? And you are just getting to know that there is an article of professional skepticism, and that even do get examined in the past paper, and can even be examined in the December 19 exam setting, or might even be examined in the March 2020 exam setting. So have you got the importance of reading this article, professional skepticism? Will this really be impacting on the answer you will be writing for the June 18 question number 1? Right, so please go through this article, drill this article, and have a proper read of this article, professional skepticism. Now let's see what was the examiner asking us in this question. Explain the matters which the audit team should approach with a high degree of professional skepticism. So the first good thing we should know that there is an article, and there is an article on professional skepticism, and as a student I should have a knowledge, and this knowledge can help in this answer. Now, matters to apply high degree of professional skepticism, right? And I go to the exam hall with the rote learning, and I'll write my answer like this. Following are the matters where the auditor should apply high degree of professional skepticism. And you apply the rote learn list given by the examiner. Number 1, fraud. Number 2, accounting estimates. Number 3, going concern. Number 4, related party transactions. And number 5, compliance with laws and regulations. And you come happily out of the exam hall thinking that you've done the justice with the answer. See, the answer I wrote in front of your screen, do you think these are the points which were given in the examiner answer? And I'm just trying to reproduce the examiner answer? And we know the golden rule of thumb to pass the P7 paper or the AAA paper is to adapt. You should have knowledge. That's wonderful. But with knowledge, you need adaptation. If you just copy paste the knowledge, you're getting nothing in the exam paper. But with the knowledge, if you show intelligence and you adapt your knowledge to the circumstances, that is wonderful. So do you all agree the answer I written in front of your screen is just the copy paste of the examiner article? If I can get your answers. Is it just the copy paste of the examiner answer? Right? So the matters I wrote here was just the copy paste of the examiner answer. And when I need to write the matters, I need to adapt the knowledge. I need to adapt the knowledge to the case study. Do you all believe this is the golden rule of thumb to adapt the knowledge to the case study? Is the golden rule to be passing the P7 paper? And how many times the student don't do this? The student just try to copy paste the knowledge on the answer script, right? Rather than the student fail to adapt. Adapt means to change the knowledge in context of the case study. And this is very, very important. Now let's see fraud, accounting estimate, going concern, related party transaction, and compliance with laws and regulation are the areas where I have to be skeptical. But can I get something out of the case study? Can I get the matters out of the case study? Would be wonderful. Now, obviously, in the exam, you will be reading the question number one full because you need to read the whole question. Now, when you're reading the whole question in the exam, right from the start to the end, you might be finding some areas where you believe I need to be more skeptical at. And those areas will become more important because you're finding those areas from the case study, right? Let's see, is there any areas where I need to be more skeptical at? The, the Bassett Group, the group is a publisher of newspapers and magazines, academic journals, and books. The group is a listed entity and has a financial year ending 30th of April. The group is a listed entity. I need to be skeptical because in a listed company there is a high risk of manipulating the financial statement. There is a high risk of creative accounting. So when I approach a listed company audit, I need to be more skeptical. So this is a case specific point. So the matters where I need to be skeptical. Number one, listed company, because there is a high risk. There is a high risk of management bias. There is a high risk of management bias in manipulating results. There is a high risk of management bias in manipulating results to show better performance in a listed company. So I need to be more skeptical here. I'm just trying to make my points. I'm not writing the paragraphs, but I'm trying to assure you that I am writing a point where I need to be skeptical out of the case study. Is this everyone clear on that first point? So when I am approaching the audit of a listed company, should I be more skeptical over I'm approaching a company which is owner managed, a small company? So if I'm approaching an audit of a listed company versus a small company, or I am approaching a listed company versus an owner managed company, where I will be more skeptical, right? I'll be more skeptical in the listed company, right? That's the first answer I got from the case. Okay, let's read the case further. And has a financial year end 30th of April, and your firm, Whippet and Company, was appointed as the group auditor in September 2017. See, your firm, Whip, Whippet, has been appointed as the group auditor when? In September 2017. And what's the year end of the company? The year end of the company is April 30th, 2018. So is it the first year audit I am doing as Whippet? Can you all understand that? My firm was appointed in September 2017 and the year end of the company is 30th April 2018. So will this be the first year audit for Whippet of the Bassett Group? Right? The year ending is 30th April, right? I'll start the audit after the year end. But when I was appointed in September 17, right? So will this be my first year audit for Bassett? And do you believe when I'm doing the first year audit, I need to be more skeptical? The first year audit requires us to be more skeptical, right? So see how I picked that this is my first year audit. So first year audit need to be more skeptical in terms of what? It's my first year audit, so I need to be more skeptical in terms of accounting policies, in terms of opening balances, in terms of laws and regulations, because I have no idea of Bassett. So when I am approaching the audit of Bassett Group for the first time, should I be more skeptical in looking at the accounting policies of Bassett, whether they're right or wrong, looking at the laws and regulations for Bassett, looking at the opening balances for Bassett? See how many areas can fall under the first year audit where I need to be more focused on, where I need to be more skeptical on. So rather than reproducing the journal list which is given in the examiner article, is it more appropriate to produce a list coming from the exam paper? Let's do one last example and then you will continue the case finding uh, matters where you need to be more skeptical at. Okay. Whippet Company will audit all of the group companies with the exception of Borzoe Company, a foreign subsidiary, which is audited by a local firm of auditor, Saluki Associate. So will I need to be more skeptical about the local firm of auditors, Saluki, how they are performing the audit of a foreign subsidiary? Because I'm not the auditor of the foreign subsidiary. Rather, the foreign subsidiary is being audited by a component auditor, and the name of the component auditor is Saluki Associate, and Saluki Associate is auditing the foreign subsidiary. So will I be more skeptical in reviewing the work of the component auditor or in checking the work of component auditor and in ensuring whether the component auditor has the right strategy? We just saw a question prior to the break, right, where the component auditor was setting a wrong strategy of the subsidiary. So should I be more skeptical about the component auditor Saluki Associate as to how they're performing work and about their audit strategy and so on and so forth? So another point in the first paragraph, I need to be skeptical about the component auditor. So how is the component auditor performing work? I need to be more skeptical about component auditor work, about the component auditor audit strategy, and about component auditor work and component auditor strategy. Right. So will you be able to continue this answer? I've given you the methods where I need to be more skeptical, but the rule of thumb is you need to read the case study. From within the case study, you will find a meta. If there is an accounting estimate given in a case study, you can write and you can write that meta as a meta where I need to be more skeptical. If there is a related party transaction in the case study, you can write related party transaction because that will become a case specific meta. So if you think that you're reading this case and in this case you found some sort of estimates that the company has used some estimates. You can make use of that. If you think the management uh, has a related party transaction in this case, you can make use of that being skeptical. But in total, how many points you need? You just need a total of 5 points to write in your answer. But please assure that you read the examiner article on professional skepticism, and please assure that you have a knowledge of professional skepticism which you can apply to questions like such. Yes, on accounting treatments, there might be some accounting treatments in the case where the auditor needs to be skeptical at. There might be accounting treatments for intangible assets where you might be skeptical. There might be an accounting treatment for research and development cost, and you need to be skeptical about whether the management has capitalized the development cost rightly or wrongly. So you need to be skeptical about accounting treatments, no doubt about that. And there might be so many accounting treatments in this case study where you need to be skeptical about whether the management has done the right accounting treatment or the management has done the wrong accounting treatment. So is that clear to everyone? This was the first 9 marks question from the June 18 question number 1. Yes, we need to be skeptical about the foreign subsidiaries. We need to be skeptical about the IS 21. We need to be skeptical about how the translation has been done of the foreign subsidiary into the group financial statement. That is all areas of skepticism, no doubt. Okay, let's look at another requirement from this question. There is another big requirement in this question after the 9 marks, professional skepticism. Look at this B requirement, such a big requirement on knowledge for 8 marks. So many marks on knowledge in June 18 paper, 9 marks on professional skepticism, and 8 marks on something very different. Total of 17 marks have been given on knowledge in the June 18 question number 1. So if you get a question like such in December 19, when the examiner has given you a substantial amount of knowledge from the articles which the examining team has written, you cannot be blank, right? Right. So let's see what is in the B requirement, and we have wrapped up the requirement number 1. So you will continue with professional skepticism answer yourself now. So let's do the last part of this June 18 question now. June 2018, question number 1, part B. And let's see what is the requirement in the question number 1, part B. Right in front of your screen, you can see the red box, right? In the red box, let's see what is the requirement B. To assist the audit assistant understanding of our audit strategy in respect of Borzoi company. Now we know Borzoi is a foreign subsidiary and we are not the auditor of Borzoi. Borzoi is being audited by a component auditor, which is Saluki. Explain the term significant component. So examiner wants us to explain the term significant component. What is a significant component? He wants us to explain that term and assess whether Borzoi company is a significant component of the group. Is Borzoi the subsidiary? Whether the subsidiary Borzoi is a significant component of the group? So first he wants us to give the definition. What is a significant component? And then the examiner wants us to assess whether Borzoi is a significant component. 2. Then the examiner wants us to discuss the nature and extent of involvement. What involvement which our firm should have with the audit risk assessment to be performed by Saluki. As a group auditor, Whippet, what involvement will Whippet have in Saluki Associates? Saluki Associates is a component auditor, right? So what sort of involvement will the group auditor have with the component auditor? So 3 things, right? 3 things being asked for 8 marks. First, to explain the term significant component, then to assess whether Borzoi is a significant component, and then to discuss the nature and extent of the involvement. See, I circle the word involvement, which our firm is Whippet, right? Which Whippet would have in Saluki Associate. So an 8 marks requirement and a very diversified requirement. So I hope you're understanding. The requirement is for 8 marks, but these 8 marks are broken down into 3 things. Number 1, it says explain the term significant component and Assess whether Borzoi is a significant component and discuss the involvement Whippet Whippet will have in the work of Saluki. Now we know Saluki is a component auditor who is looking after Borzoi, and Whippet is the group auditor. So a whole question on group auditor, a whole question on component auditor, 8 marks. Now we know everything we do, we get 2 marks. Explain the term significant component, 2 marks. Assess whether Borzoi is a significant component, 2 marks. Discuss the involvement. We can discuss 2 involvements. So if I explain the term, I'll take 2 marks for that. When I assess whether Borzoi is a significant component, I'll take 2 marks from here. And then I need to discuss the involvement. So I can discuss 2 involvements, discuss 2 involvements, because every involvement will give me 2 marks. Discuss 2 involvement, each for 2 marks is equal to 4 marks. And that completes my 8 marks answer. So try to understand the importance of planning, and again I'm trying to assure that you understand the importance of reading the requirement and you understand the importance of allocating the marks. I hope everyone is getting sound on reading, sound on breaking the question, sound on allocating the marks to a question. And that's the only way you can improve your chances of success in exam paper. So now, knowing how to allocate the marks, how many parts are there, let's start planning the answer. Again, 8 marks, multiply by 1.95 minutes. Anyone can give me a quick answer for that. 8 marks multiplied by 1.95, 15.6 minutes I have in total. 1/4 of this has to be spent on planning. So 1/4 of 15.6 is 3.9 minutes. So how much time I have to write the answer? The writing time for answer is the writing point time is 11.7 minutes. I think 4 minutes is good to read Borzoi is a significant component and to discuss things up. Explain the term significant component. What is a significant component? Let's go down with that. Significant component. We need not to see the case for that because that's a definition the examiner is asking. What is a significant component? And I hope all of you know that component means the subsidiary auditor. So Saluki is the subsidiary auditor, and we need to define what is a component, significant component definition. See, what's the definition? The definition is given in ISA 600, right? ISA 600 defines the definition of a significant component. I'm writing the definition for you, which can be of interest to all of you. A component identified by the group auditor, a component identified by the group auditor which is of individual financial significance, to the group, or a component identified by the group auditor which is of individual financial significance to the group, or significant due to its specific nature or circumstances. And this is the definition of what is a significant component. Now, which component are we looking for? We are looking for Borzoi. Borzoi is a component for the group, and it says a component identified by the group auditor which is of individual financial significance. Is Borzoi financially significant to the group? We need to identify that in the next part. But if a component is individually financially significant, then that is a significant component. And not just it can be of individual significant financial significant, it could be significant due to the specific nature. Like it's a new component. You have taken on the new subsidiary. You have acquired the subsidiary for the first time. Then irrespective of the value, the subsidiary for the group will become important because you acquired the subsidiary for the first time. So it could be significant due to its specific nature. How many times we have seen the AAA paper where the company has acquired a subsidiary for the first time? And if you acquired a subsidiary for the first time, that new subsidiary, that new component will automatically be important irrespective of the value. So it could be significant financially, it could be significant because of its nature, and it could be significant because of the circumstances. There might be a problem in the subsidiary, circumstances. There might be a going concern problem in the subsidiary. So there might be a circumstance which makes the subsidiary important. So is a subsidiary only important on the basis of financial significance? No. It can even be important on the basis of its specific nature. I've given you example, and it could be important on the basis of the circumstances. So try to realize that what makes a component significant, either financially, either through a specific nature or through a circumstances. Now we need to see whether Borzoi is a significant component. Let's do Borzoi. Borzoi is a significant component or not? How would we know that? Let's do the financial analysis of Borzoi. I hope all of you know the rule for financial significance. What's the rule for financial significance? Anyone knows that? Rule for financial significance. Is there any threshold to consider the component significant to the group? Rule for financial significance of a component to group. Yes, that's good answers. Rule for financial significance of a component to group is 15% of the total assets, 15% or more, 15% or more of the total assets, or of the revenue, or of the profit, or of the profit of the group. So let's see, is Borzoi 15% or more of the group total assets or the group revenue or the group profit, to identify whether Borzoi is a significant component or not. Okay, let's see, is there a paragraph for Borzoi? Yes, there is a paragraph for Borzoi in this question. Right here, there is a paragraph for Borzoi. Let's read this paragraph and identify, is Borzoi a significant component? Borzoi is located in Farland, a country which has recently experienced political unrest. So it's also important by its specific circumstances, because it's located in a country where there is a political unrest which can bring the going concern of Borzoi into doubts as well. So it can also become important because of its circumstances, leading to a significant volatility in the local currency, the ACCA. The ACCA is the local currency for Farland, where Borzoi is located. At today's date, the management accounts of Borzoi recognize total assets of 68 million ACCA. So 68 million ACCA is the total assets of this subsidiary. And the exchange rate is 4 ACCA to 1. For the determination whether it is a significant component, we will use this exchange rate 4 ACCA to $1, and $68 million is the ACCA, is the total assets of Borzoi. We're not using the fluctuated rates coming after, which has been fluctuating in the last 10 months. In the last 6 months, the exchange rates have been fluctuating between 10 ACCA to $1 and 3 ACCA to $1. We're not using those exchange rates. We are using the exchange rate which is at the today's date, So at today's date, 68 million ACCA and 4 ACCAs is equal to $1, right? So is Borzoi a significant component? Dollar 68, sorry, 68 million ACCA divided by 4 is equal to dollar 17 million. So when you divide 68 million ACCA with 4, you get $17 million of total assets for Borzoi. Now you divide the $17 million assets, $17 million the assets for Borzoi with the group total assets. How much is the group total assets? Let's find the group total assets. Let's see, have they been given in the introductory paragraph? Okay, right over here, right, is the group total assets. So we are taking the most latest 2018. So for 2018, the total assets for 2018 is $95 million. So $95 million is the total projected assets for the group. So $95 million is the total assets. Group total assets, that is $95 million. How much is the percentage? Please just confirm me one thing. 68 million ACCA, when you divide that by 4, what's the answer? Okay, that's 17 million, right? 17 million is the total assets, right? Okay. Now, when you divide the 17 million with the group total assets of $95 million, what's the percentage? 17.9% of the group total assets. So do you believe this Borzoi is a significant component? Yes, Borzoi is a significant component. And did you found the calculation? If it is 15% or if it exceeds 15%, then automatically it becomes significant to the group, right? So the first question the examiner was asking was, explain what is a significant component. Then the second question the examiner asked was, assess whether Borzoi is a significant component. And no doubt Borzoi is a significant component. It is 17.9% of the group total assets, and hence Borzoi is a significant component for the group. The last question of the examiner: discuss the involvement the group auditor will have with the component auditor. Whippet will have with Saluki. Discuss the involvement. Okay, involvement the group auditor will have in component auditor, and we have 4 marks for this. So 2 involvements. The first involvement the group auditor have in component auditor is that the group auditor needs to evaluate the competence uh, independence of the component auditor before placing any reliance on the work of Saluki. So you need to confirm the competence and independence of Saluki, because Saluki is a component auditor and is a component auditor of a significant subsidiary. So you need to first test Saluki because it's a local firm of auditor. So being a local firm of auditor, you need to check its competence and independence before you can place a reliance on the work of Saluki. Another involvement can be you can review the working papers, you can review the audit strategy, just like we did the question before the break where we were looking at the audit strategy of Vulcha. So you can review the audit strategy of Saluki for Berzoe. You can also review the working papers to confirm the work performed by Saluki in respect of the risky areas, in respect of the risky areas. So I've given you 3 involvements, right? You need to write 2 involvements. So yes, assess the adequacy of the work done by Saluki, review the working papers, review the audit strategy. We got this audit strategy point from the question we were doing prior to the break, Vulture and links. So is everyone clear on the answer plan? So have you imagined June 18 question? 9 marks was given on professional skepticism and 8 marks was given on the component auditor, identifying the importance of the component auditor and whether the component auditor is a significant component or not. So have you realized how many marks were there on the knowledge factor in the June 18 paper? So is everyone now clear on the component auditor? And is everyone now clear on the significance of the component auditor and how you find that in the exam paper? Is everyone clear on this? Just one last thing before I take on the other questions. When you look at these articles on the ACCA website for AAA and you explore these articles, can you see this article here on the website AAA, technical articles right in front of your screen, group auditing? If you do read this article on group auditing, this is such a good article, which will really give you the definition of a significant component, which will give you how the group auditor involves in the component auditor. So if you want to have a crystal clear knowledge about how the group auditor involves in a subsidiary auditor, and what is a significant subsidiary or what is a significant component, all these rules and regulations can come from the article right in front of the screen, which is known as group auditing. So please download this article, Group Auditing, read this article, Group Auditing, so you have a clear understanding about the importance of this topic from an examination point of view. So I recommended a professional skepticism article today, and I recommended a group auditing article today. Yesterday, I recommended planning and audit of financial statement, and I even recommended audit acceptance decision for audit and non-audit engagements. So I hope over the last 2 days, many articles have been recommended, and you must be reading them for sure. Okay, let's move on to the last of the 2 questions. Okay, now that means we are left with December 17 and December 18. Okay, let's first do December 17. It's more like the September 18 question we did, will not take much time. So let's first explore what's in December 17, question number 1. Okay, December 17, question number 1, right? Let's see what's inside this question. When you look at the December 17, question number 1, for 10 marks, it has business risk. For another 10 marks, it has the risk of material misstatement. So these are the core areas which have gone in the previous webinars. Then for 6 marks, you need to perform procedures for 6 marks. But for the remaining 5 marks, you have a requirement which I need to address. You will be amazed to see how much similarity exists if you practice a lot of paper. We just did the September 18 paper. Uh, Sorry, we did the June 19 paper, where we got an email from Len, and in that email from Len there was something suspicious, and from that suspicious thing we need to identify the answer. See, the same is happening here. In respect of an email received from the finance director, discuss the audit implications for planning the group audit and explain any relevant actions to be taken by the firm. Now again, there is an email here. In respect of an email, this time the email is coming from the finance director. There must be something suspicious in this email. So in respect of the email received from the finance director, discuss the audit implications. Sorry, discuss the additional implications for the planning of the group audit and explain any relevant actions. We have 5 marks. You know the marking scheme, 5 divided by 2. But there is a specific email and we need to do something on that email of the finance director. So this tendency of the examiner giving you an email of a certain person and asking you a question on that email of a certain person is like very repetitive feature of the AAA exam. We just saw that in the June 19 exam paper. So let's see what is the email of the finance director and what are additional implications from the email in terms of planning the group audit and explaining any relevant actions to be taken by the firm. So let's plan the answer for December 17. Question number 1, C. This December 2017. Question number 1, part C, C1. And we're looking at a question here which says, discuss the additional implications for the planning of the group audit and explain any actions to be taken. Right, and we have 5 marks, so we'll divide it by 2, so we need to write 3 valid points, not a lengthy answer, to make the 5 marks here. So we need to discuss the additional implications for the planning. That's number 1. And the second is we need to discuss the actions. So 2 things and just 5 marks, so not a lengthy answer at all. So where should we find the answer? The answer is in the email we got from the finance director. So let's critically read this email of the finance director. But just before that, 5 marks multiplied by 1.95 minutes is equal to how much? Okay, 9.75 minutes. Thanks for the spontaneous answer. 1/4 of this time has to be spent on planning, which is 1/4 of this time is to be spent on planning. Okay, that's 2 minutes and 43 seconds is to be spent on planning. So how much time should I be having for writing the answer? Okay, a good 7.3 minutes for 3 valid points. That's good enough. 7.3 minutes, right, to write in the valid answer. Okay, now let's see what's in the email of the director and what can we do in terms of planning. So let's first do the planning from the email of the finance director. We need to discuss the implications for planning, right? So let's see what's so special in the email which will be affecting our planning and the actions to be taken. Okay, let's go down, read the email. Okay, here is the email in front of your screen. Extract from the email from the group finance director to John, the partner. Let's see what the director has emailed to the partner. John, the group lawyer has received a letter from Ocean Protection a multinational pressure group which aims to safeguard marine environment. Ocean Protection is claiming that our hotel guests are causing environmental damage to the delicate coral reef when scuba diving under the supervision of the group scuba diving instructor. So there is a claim coming from the pressure group, and the pressure group is claiming that our hotel guests are causing environmental damage. So that's a concern point of the pressure group. Ocean Protection is pressing against the group and allege that our activities are in breach of the international environmental legislation. So the pressure group is saying that our activities are in breach of the international environmental regulations. Damages of $10 million is being sought, and the pressure group wants a damages of a $10 million. So they think that we have breached the laws and regulations, we are not abiding by the environmental laws and regulations, and they want a penalty, they want a damage of a $10 million. The group is keen to avoid any media attention. The group wants to avoid any media attention. So I'm hoping to negotiate a lower level of payment and an agreement from the Ocean Protection that they will not make the issue public. So the director thinks that I want to avoid the media attention, so I will negotiate less than $10 million with the Ocean Protection, and I'll ask Ocean Protection to keep this issue uh, off from the media. From an accounting point of view, we don't want, from an accounting point of view, we don't want to recognize a liability as the disclosures will draw attention to the matter. So see, that's another strange matter. They don't want to recognize a liability because they think that will bring things to public. So we will account for any necessary payment when it is made, which is likely to be the next year. So that's technically wrong. There is a $10 million sought, which we should be recognizing as a provision, and the provision should be adjusted in the financial statement for this year. So there are strange comments coming from the director. I understand that your audit team will need to look into this issue, but I ask that you only speak to me. I ask you only speak to me about it and do not speak to any other employee. So he's trying to put a scope limitation. He's saying that you can only speak to me, you cannot speak to anyone else. Also, I don't want you to contact the Ocean Protection as this could impact our negotiations. See, the director is trying to limit our scope. He's saying you can only talk to me, you cannot talk to anyone else, not even the Ocean Protection. So he's trying to limit my scope. And more importantly, he says that I don't want a liability to be recognized, which is the wrong accounting treatment. And he wants to avoid the media attention. And there is a non-compliance with laws and regulation. They've breached the environmental laws, and the Ocean Protection is putting a claim of a $10 million. So examiner is asking a question to us: what is the implication for planning the group audit? Now you've seen the problem. You've seen the problem, right? What's the implication on the planning of the group audit? So the first thing we got from the email of the finance director, that there has been a breach of laws and regulations. There has been a claim from the pressure group. There has been a claim from the pressure group of $10 million. The finance director wants to avoid any media attention. He wants to avoid any media attention. He wants not to recognize any liability, any provision. And lastly, he wants the audit team to speak to him only. He wants the audit team to speak to him only. A lot of problems, right? Just to write 3 valid points, what's the implication on the planning? I think the first implication for planning, if you need to write in a bullet answer here, the first implication for the planning in this case is uh, the scope limitation. The scope limitation. Uh, putting restrictions on the work of the auditor, and this needs to be discussed with TCWG, because the finance director is trying to limit my scope. He's trying to put restrictions on my scope, and as an action, I need to discuss this with those charged with governance in order to remove this, in order for this to be removed. So can you see the action in the bracket? But look at the issue. The issue is that the finance director is trying to put restriction on the work of the auditor, which brings in doubt the integrity of the finance director, as if he's trying to hide something. Integrity of the finance director. Probably he's trying to conceal something from the auditor. That's why he's saying, just speak to me, don't speak to anyone else. Second issue, no provision. He don't want a provision to be recognized, which is uh, a wrong accounting treatment, and the auditor needs to take this as something very important. You need to take this as something very important, because this is a wrong accounting treatment, and this might materially misstate the financial statements, if the provision is not recognized. So I need to be skeptical. I need to think about my actions. I need to be skeptical here. Skeptical as to why the finance director is concealing information. I need to be skeptical about that. I need to be skeptical why not recording a liability. So there are a lot of implications, right? I think the implication is also coming on the integrity of the client. The implication is also coming on the work you need to perform, right? So I hope you can think of the answer from the points I've raised from the email of the partner. I've given you 3 points, right, to make up a 5 marks answer, but you can think beyond this. You have so many points to think about. Yes, and even there is a breach of laws and regulation, breach of laws and auditor responsibility for NOCLA, non-compliance with laws and regulation. I even recommended you the article to read. So many points, right? You can think about and write. You just have 5 marks. To write the answer. So is everyone clear on this answer? So this was from the December 17 exam paper, right? Putting in focus the email. So there is a tendency of examiner putting an email in the exam paper and something suspicious is in the email, and the examiner wants you to do something on the email, right? So that's it's from the December 17 question number 1C, focusing on the email of the finance director. Now that's bringing us to one of the last question from the series of question number 1, which is December 18. Let's see what was specifically asked for in the question number 1 of the December 18 exam paper. Okay, let's scroll down for the December 18 exam paper right in front of your screen. Let's see what the examiner asked for in the December 18 exam paper. Okay, business risk for 8 marks, covered in my previous webinars. Risk of material misstatement for 18 marks, again covered in my previous webinar as a topic. Then again, the procedures, covered in my previous webinars many times. Procedures, this is for 6 marks. Then another requirement here. In the exhibit 4, I have provided you with some information relating to EMU James Company. In respect of this, in your briefing note, you should also. So again, there is some suspicious information in the exhibit 4. So in exhibit 4, I have provided you with some information relating to EMU Gym. So this is a very important tendency of examiner telling you something in exhibit 5 or in exhibit 4 or in exhibit 3. We have seen that consistently since yesterday, that the examiner relates a specific exhibit and tell you there is a problem in this exhibit, go and see this. So let's see what's in the exhibit 4 about Emu Gym and what we need to do. Number 1, evaluate the matters to be considered in deciding whether to accept an engagement to provide Emu Gym Company with an audit or a limited assurance service. Evaluate the matters to be considered in deciding whether to accept an engagement to provide Emu Gym Company with an audit or a limited assurance review. Can I provide Emu Gym with an audit service or a limited assurance review? What matters should I be considering whether to accept the engagement? And then in the E part, it says, in relation to the suspicion of fraud, in relation to the suspicion of fraud being carried out at Emu Gym, discuss whether an audit or a limited assurance review of the financial statement in the previous year could have uncovered the fraud. So, in respect of the fraud, discuss whether audit or a limited assurance review of the financial statement in the previous years could have uncovered the fraud. So, you should be knowing a difference between audit and you should be knowing a difference between a limited assurance review and whether an audit could have uncovered the fraud in the previous year or whether a limited assurance review would have uncovered the fraud in the previous year. We have 6 marks for that. And we have 8 marks for whether matters to consider when accepting an engagement. 8 marks. Now let's prepare this answer for December 17 exams, December 18 exams. December 18, question number 1, we're looking into the part D and E. When we look at the part D focus on matters to be considered in accepting an engagement. Now, whenever you accept an engagement, there are some specific matters which you need to focus on. And the specific matters are given somewhere in the examiner article, which I recommended you yesterday. Then in the part E, you need to, in context of fraud, whether an audit or a review in previous year could have uncovered fraud, whether an audit or a review would have uncovered fraud in previous year. And this is a 6 marks question. Now that means 8 divided by 2, we need to write 4 matters. 6 divided by 2, we need to write 3 points. So that's the structure, right? Let's consider the matters. Matters to be considered in accepting an engagement. And this is the article which I recommended you yesterday. Now becomes very important. This article, see, acceptance decision for audit and assurance engagement. How you accept an engagement. What are the matters you need to consider when you are accepting an engagement? And this article gives you the entire answer. You read this article and you can write the answer for Emu Gyms and you can explore the answer for Emu Gyms. What should be the answer? When you are accepting a new client, see, in the exhibit 4, when you read exhibit 4, you will come to know that Emu Gym is a new client and how you accept a new client. So you read this and you will come to know the matters you should be identifying when you are accepting the engagement of Emu Gym. So you can build up your answer from here for December 18 question. right after reading this particular paragraph, and you will be so clear. You read this para and then you read the exhibit 4, which is the exhibit 4 given in this December 18 paper. See, this is the exhibit 4, right? In the exhibit 4, you had a telephonic conversation with Stella and Mick, managing directors of Emu Gyms. And Emu Gym wants you to become their auditor. So you need to read the conversation you had with Stella and Mick, and you need to identify what sort of matters you should consider when you are accepting the engagement for Emu Gyms. And you can connect this with your knowledge. So first take the knowledge and then work upon acceptance. Just to give you a quick go through, because the time is of essence, matters when you are accepting an engagement. You need to consider the client integrity as the first matter. Please do read the article. Let's write it here. Read article plus then apply it to Emu Gyms. So client integrity is one matter, right? Uh, Correspondence with previous auditor is another matter. If there is a previous auditor, there is a previous auditor. Then also uh, looking at the ethical issues, any ethical issues when you're accepting the engagement, ethical issues given in the case. You also need to consider the competence of the firm, whether the firm is competent to perform services, competence of the audit firm. Can they offer service to the client? You need to consider the fees. Will you be getting a good amount of fees from giving services to Emu Gyms? You need to consider your competence. You need to consider your fees. You need to consider the deadlines. Are the deadlines realistic? Because you need to consider the deadlines versus resources. How much resources you will be using when you will be engaging yourself with Emu Gyms. So there are a lot of issues, right, which you can come across while reading the article. But this is just a list which can help you plan your answer for Emu Gyms. You can connect these with Emu Gyms. The one which connects are better. The one which don't connects are not good points. So you can make a rote learn list from the article, but then you need to apply the list to Emu Gyms and see what's exactly happening with Emu Gyms in the exhibit 4 to plan up your answer. So you need to read the exhibit 4, right, and see what you can do in terms of writing the methods to be considered in accepting engagement. And please remember, this is such an important area of your syllabus, methods to consider in accepting engagement. And this is a syllabus area which I'm just highlighting here. This is a syllabus area. Acceptance decision for audit and assurance engagement, which is known as practice management. A lot of times the students see the syllabus of AAA and you see this word practice management. And practice management is such a regular feature of exam papers. So you should be reading this article to know how you accept a client and what are parameters of accepting a client, right? So please go through this article, make a list, apply that list on exhibit 4. How will you be accepting the client Emu Gym? First, try to make up your own answer. And if you struggle making your own answer, then go down and see the examiner answer for December 18 exam paper. Okay, just one last thing so that you have an emphasis of that as well. We're just running into the last few minutes now. In context of fraud, whether an audit or a review would have uncovered fraud in the previous year. Now, as a student, you should understand what is an audit. And as a student, you should understand what is a review of the financial statements. Now we know audit and review have a difference. Audit is about reasonable assurance, and a review is about moderate assurance. And the scope of the review, is limited, and it's limited to just analytical procedures and inquiry. So you have a very limited scope when you perform a review of a financial statement, because you're just limited to analytical procedures and inquiry. But yes, when you're conducting an audit, the audit do have a better scope. The scope of the audit includes test of controls plus the substantive procedures. So you can do a lot more in audit, right? That's the reason. That's the reason you're giving a reasonable assurance. But the scope of the review is limited. So in context of fraud, whether an audit or a review would have uncovered fraud, perhaps no, because there are so many limitations with audit. Do you believe there are limitations with audit? We do audit on a sample basis, so detecting a fraud becomes difficult. We do audit on a material basis. Detecting a fraud becomes difficult. So there are some limitations with audit, right? And within the limitation, if the auditor identifies the fraud, if the auditor identifies the fraud, then it is the auditor responsibility. But we cannot say the auditor has the primary responsibility of detecting a fraud in audit. No, you need to understand there are limitations with audit, and within those limitations, the auditor cannot find fraud every time. Is that clear with everyone? Please keep dropping your feedback for the session today as we enter the last 4 minutes of the session. Your feedback about the session today and the overall session from yesterday to today in terms of the question number 1. Uh, if you can drop your feedbacks about how the sessions have been and how much have you learned on question 1 since yesterday to today in terms of your preparation towards the December 19 exams would be wonderful. So keep dropping your feedback over the next 3 to 4 minutes as the session comes to the wrap up time now. Now, when you look at the review of the financial statement, the review is just a limited exercise. You just do the analytical procedures and inquiry in review. So is there any chance you can get hold of a fraud? The chances are too less because you are doing so less procedures in review. So in comparison, there is a chance you might detect a fraud in audit, but that's not 100%. But in a review, uh, finding a fraud, uncovering a fraud becomes more difficult, right? So you need to write 3 points here, whether you write more points for audit or less points for review, but you need to write them for both. You just need to write 3 points to make up your 6 marks answer here, that in context of fraud, whether audit or review would have uncovered fraud in previous year. And in the very first part, the D part, you need to focus on the methods in accepting an engagement. And for that, I have recommended you that you need to read the article, make a list, and apply the list on Emogems in the exhibit number 4. So please go through this exhibit 4 in front of your screen, scroll down this exhibit properly, identify the points which you think can help you in taking a decision whether you are um, accepting Emogems or not. Right, so I hope this session over the last 2 days where the focus was on question 1, because we will be focusing on question 2 starting from tomorrow, must have given you a lot of insights about how you should be preparing for question number 1. So keep dropping your feedbacks, and I'm just wrapping up this session. Now, over the last 2 days, the focus was on question 1. We did almost like 9 question 1s of all the recent exams to give you an idea about what else comes in question 1, apart from risk, apart from procedures, apart from ethics. So I hope now when you see my previous webinars, and you see this webinar, you can prepare yourself for question 1 more effectively, right? And you can have a much more broader picture to question number 1. So the question number 1 is all about risk, is all about procedures, is all about ethics, is all about other areas. And I deliberately touched upon the other areas in this session, which I have not done in the previous session. So you get a maximum benefit of this December 19 webinar. I have recommended you a lot of articles. Please go through them. And I've recommended you a lot of time management skills. Please go through them. because that is all very important when you prepare yourself for exams coming up in December. So a lot of things gone down yesterday, a lot of things gone down today. I hope you've taken an effective note of that, and you will be going through that in a very proper manner so that you can prepare yourself for exams effectively, right? These are all the articles, main articles recommended: planning an audit of financial statement yesterday, acceptance decision today, professional skepticism today. I even recommended a group audit article, and uh, these are fundamental articles, right, which you should be reading and going through. And just one last stretch before I wind up the session. This is how I looked at question one at the start of my session yesterday. This chart in front of you. On the left hand side are the areas which have gone in the previous webinar, and now on the right hand side are the areas which have gone through in the December 19 webinar. You need to understand there was a time constraint, and within the limitations of 6 hours and 2 days, I tried my best to fit as many things as possible from the first question to give you a better idea of your preparation towards the December 19 exams. So I wish you best of luck, and I see you live tomorrow on the day three, where the agenda of day three is to focus on the question number two of the AAA paper, which will give you more insights about your preparation towards December 19 exams. Right. I'll be looking forward to your feedback on the WhatsApp group. And once the session gets over, you will see the feedback form coming in front of your screen. Please fill in the feedback form carefully. And I'll see you tomorrow live for the day three. So it's time to say you goodbye. Have a nice day, and I'll see you tomorrow live. Goodbye and Allah Hafiz.